Thank you for joining us for today's event, the Reading Culture Advantage, Boosting Achievement Across the Curriculum, part one of a 4-session virtual book study of Dr. Margaret Merga's book, Creating a Reading Culture in Primary and Secondary Schools, a Practical Guide. My name is Susie Tonini. I'm the school library consultant for the Colorado State Library, and I'll be leading each of the 4 virtual book study sessions. Today's event is being recorded, and all registrants will receive an email with a link to the recording, as well as any resources shared during the presentation. This email will include a link to a form with reflection and evaluation questions, and the evaluation questions are used by the State Library to gauge the impact of our programming. For those of you who are not already familiar with the State Library, I'd like to share a few things that I think every Coloradan and every citizen of the United States should know about state libraries. Every state in the nation has a state library. And in some states like Colorado, the state library is part of the Department of Education. We're federally funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And our mission is to help libraries, schools, museums, and other organizations improve services, making it easier for all Coloradans to access and use the materials and information they need for lifelong learning. For Colorado residents of all ages who cannot read standard print, including K-12 students with dyslexia, the Talking Book Library provides free access to audio, braille, and large print books. And this image is hyperlinked, so if you click on that, it'll take you directly to that website to learn more. My unit, Library Development, provides leadership and support for public and school libraries, plus consultation and continuing education. And now that you know a little bit more about me and the State Library, let's get started. First off, I want to thank Academy District 20 Library Media Specialist Carol Bramschreiber for inspiring this book study. Carol introduced me to this book and used Merga's work to lead professional learning in her district. And after I read the first 2 chapters, I understood why Carol was so enthusiastic about a book that honestly, like first glance at its cover, it was not screaming "read me first" on my TBR pile. But the 2 aspects of Merga's book that I appreciate the most. Number one, it's an incredible compilation of reading research. And just a quick skim of the references, you can immediately tell that the book is focused on research-backed practices. And number 2, true to its title, it reads like a practical guidebook and it's action-oriented. I'm also grateful to all of you. I'm so excited to see all of you here today, that you're choosing to invest your valuable and limited professional learning time into this book study. And if you're like me and you want to know from the beginning what the end goal is, here it is. I've synthesized Merga's book into this 9-step plan for creating a reading culture. And you can use the link on this slide to create your own copy. I'll also send this out over email. And this book study will prepare you to execute each step of this plan. But the true value of our 4 virtual sessions will be learning with and from one another what strategies best promote reading engagement at your school and how to execute the plan. Because none of us can do this alone, whether you're a superintendent, a school administrator, a school librarian, a classroom teacher. Creating a reading culture requires collaboration. So how will we get there? Here's the plan. Today, we'll focus on the why. This will ground our learning in data and begin our process of learning more about the students we serve, nothing about them without them. Session 2 will be heavily focused on the what. We'll learn about research-supported practices that promote reading engagement. Chapter 2 is a goldmine of information. Sessions 3 and 4 will focus on the how. First, the high-level how of how you get people on board and lead change. And then in session 4, the nuts and bolts how. How do you successfully execute the reading action plan? Reading culture action plan, excuse me. And in every session, you'll have time to connect with what I'm calling the campfire crew, because after all, Colorado. The campfire crew time will be a valuable opportunity to learn about what's happening in other schools and districts and thought partner with others to start the process of building a reading culture. So let's jump in. Today is all about the why. Before we learn how to promote reading engagement and build a school-wide culture of reading, I want to prove to you that this is a worthwhile pursuit. This is a screenshot of the CDE's Read Act data dashboard. And if you're outside of Colorado, my guess is your data probably looks pretty similar. The Colorado Reading to Ensure Academic Development Act, or the READ Act, was passed by the Colorado legislature in 2012, and it focuses on early literacy development for all students, especially students at risk to not read at grade level by the end of third grade. Students are tested for reading skills, and those who are not reading at grade level are given individual read plans. In 2019, the legislature strengthened the READ Act, adding new emphasis on the importance of instruction that is scientifically proven to be effective in teaching all students to read at grade level. The orange portions of the bar graph represent the number of students with what CDE refers to as significant reading deficiencies. And while there has been modest improvement over the past 3 years, we're not moving the needle fast enough. In 2017-18, 15.5% of K through third grade students had significant reading deficiencies. In 2022-23, 27% of K through third grade students have significant reading deficiencies. And the impact of a global pandemic is clear. In 2018-19, compared to 2018-19, approximately 20,000 fewer students were assessed in 2020-2021, and the number of students with significant reading deficiencies increased by more than 10,000. US research suggests that many students experience a reading achievement gap. This is something we all know. Struggling to reach achievement gains, typical in pre-pandemic conditions, and students from disadvantaged backgrounds face a longer recovery time than their more advantaged peers. And this is our state data, and it reflects that statement. To address this, one of the Colorado Department of Education's goals is to increase the percentage of third graders meeting or exceeding expectation on the English Language Arts CMAS test to 60% from its current average of 42.1%. Which leads to the question, how do Colorado schools, and likely schools outside of Colorado, assess students' literacy proficiency? Chronological awareness, phonemic awareness, concept of print, alphabetic principle, phonics, fluency, vocabulary development, oral language, and listening and reading comprehension. As a former third grade classroom teacher, I learned how to teach all these literacy skills, and I fully support the importance of high quality, evidence-based reading instruction. But this book is not about literacy instruction. Merga focuses on what is not measured by traditional K-12 assessments that research shows also affects students' reading achievement. And that's reading engagement, or the attitudes towards reading and frequency of reading, and reading culture, social influences, environment, and resources. And here's the through line. Literacy skills strengthened by reading engagement have transferable value. Strong literacy skills support students' performance across all subject areas. If we increase reading engagement, we improve literacy skills. If we improve literacy skills, we improve achievement in all subject areas. Here's my disclaimer. Building a reading culture and promoting reading engagement are not a substitute for high quality reading instruction. These research-supported strategies are extra tools in your toolbox. And I know for our classroom teachers who are here with us today, I know teachers have enough on your plate, and I completely agree. I hope to prove it to you in session 4 that this approach has the potential to be a teaching perk and reconnect educators with why we teach. But for now, I need you to trust me. Why do we need more tools? Here's why. Because grades 4 through 12 can no longer be a reading no man's land. Peter Heidecooper recently published this article for BoardHawk, an independent website that covers public education in Colorado. In the article titled Grades 4 through 12 Cannot Remain a Reading No Man's Land, Heidecooper quotes Angie Gallanos, CDE's former director of elementary literacy and school readiness. What does it mean to be on a read plan in grades 4 through 12? it could be anything. After third grade, it's no man's land. 51,294 is the number of Colorado students in grades 4 through 12 currently on a read plan. And one of the questions that Heike proposes in his article is, what are districts and schools doing to help these 50,000 students learn to read? And I would like to slightly revise this question and think beyond independent reading skill acquisition. What if we ask the question, what are districts and schools doing to help all students to read? Back to reading engagement and reading culture. No, they are not literacy skills, but Merga provides a wealth of research that demonstrates how both reading engagement and reading culture affect reading achievement. So let's look at reading engagement first. It's no surprise, reading engagement has been steadily decreasing over time. So what are the causes of students sliding interest in reading? Merga cites research that supports 6 causes, and we're going to dive into each one. The first 2 are expired expectations and orphan responsibility. As Merga states, if we want young people to continue to read throughout the years of schooling, young people need to be continually socialized as readers. Expired expectations relates to research findings that students may perceive a withdrawal of expectations that they read for pleasure once they learn how to read independently, which leads them to conclude reading's no longer an important practice. And expired expectations tend to go hand in hand with orphan responsibility. Encouraging children to read beyond the point of independent reading skill acquisition may become an orphan responsibility, where parents view this as the responsibility of teachers, and teachers expect it to be the responsibility of parents, making it no one's role. Budgets reflect values and expired expectations. In 2023-24, 51,294 students in grades 4 through 12 remained on a read plan, but schools do not receive READ Act funding for students in grades 4 through 12. It's not surprising to see this table of CMAS English Language Arts test results, which compares 2023 and 2024 test scores. The numbers in green indicate significant score increases for third grade students, but fourth grade is a different story. The numbers in red indicate significant score decreases, and there were no significant score increases for any group of fourth grade students. In addition to expired expectations and orphan responsibility, what else causes a declining students' reading engagement? Well, we learned from Merga that testing is one of those reasons. Schools may inadvertently transmit the perception that reading is something solely done for the purpose of testing and learning. I absolutely have colleagues in elementary school that shifted grades because they felt like so much of their role was becoming testing reading. Teachers focus on reading for learning rather than enjoyment may play a role in cementing the divorce between reading and enjoyment. I thought that was such a powerful statement. If we're not modeling enjoyment of reading as adults, if students never have the opportunity to choose their own books to read, if students don't have access to books they want to read, and if students only associate reading with testing, then it's no surprise that students don't read. I particularly love this statement in Merga's book. Most types of assessments are very limited as student learning opportunities, and weighing the pig does not make it fatter. And while you may not be in a position to change the amount of instructional time spent on assessing students' literacy skills, you're likely in a position to help create a balance. Yes, we assess students' reading skills to guide instruction. It is absolutely necessary. We have to know where kids are at to guide instruction. And we can immerse them in positive reading experiences. Another cause of students' decline in reading engagement, how they are socialized as readers or not at home. Parents and caregivers influence their children's reader identities, reading habits, access to books, and research shows that boys and girls come to school differently resourced. And Colorado data reflects the research. This is my home district of Denver. 22.5% of females have a significant reading deficiency compared to 25.7% of males. And then there are the competing leisure pursuits. And I know we all think of smartphones and iPads, basically anything with a screen. As the mom of 2 teenagers, like the struggle is real. But Merga states that to simplistically attribute reader reluctance to a single cause can be problematic, and that we will need to accept there may be multiple factors that contribute to reader reluctance that will need to be given critical consideration in planning for a whole school reading culture. In some schools, it may be that your students are working at after-school jobs until late at night, while in other schools, students are involved in multiple after-school activities that allow little time for anything else. And it may also be the phones. And the final cause of decline in reading interest, access to well-resourced school libraries. And the 2 key elements to well-resourced school libraries are school librarians and consistent, sufficient funding for library resources. And library staffing and library budgets vary widely in Colorado. The libslide.org website is part of the grant project SLIDE, School Librarians in Decline or Evolution, funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. The website, and it's linked on this slide, provides data tools for you to easily pull library staffing data profiles of both your state and your individual districts. On the map, the counties colored in blue are counties where there is at least 1 certified teacher librarian, and blue indicates that there's just one, that there's at least one. So in some counties that might be as few as 1. This is very different from my home state of Virginia, where I began my teaching career. When I moved to Colorado, it was shocking and deeply disappointing that every school did not have a school library staffed by a trained professional. Okay, that's enough of me talking. I really want to hear from all of you. So what we're going to start off with are 6 lightning polls. So if you were kicked back, now it's time to grab your mouse and get ready to click. We're going to take 6 quick polls, and I want to hear from all of you. What do you feel are those causes of decline in students' pleasure reading or recreational reading for the students in your school? Let me launch these polls really quick. Okay, here comes the first one. So basically for each question, you'll be answering how much you agree with the statement, either strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, disagree, or strongly disagree. Okay, and here are our results. So 65% agree, 17% strongly agree. And I'll let you read the rest of the results there. Okay, let's take a look at the impact of high stakes testing. So in your school or district, the impact of high stakes testing significantly contributes to students' decline in recreational reading. And thank you guys for answering so quickly. Here we go, end the poll. And here are our results. So not quite, so some folks are certainly in agreement, but many are neither agree nor disagree. Next one, home socialization practices. So how students are socialized by their parents and caregivers at home when we're thinking about their reader identity and reading habits. Okay, let's take a look at our results. So a lot of agreement there, no strong disagreement. Competing leisure pursuits. I'm super curious about this one. So this could be anything that that competes with recreational reading. So it could be after school work. It could be overscheduled kids. It could be use of screens. I get to see a sneak preview of the results, so this will probably not be a surprise. Let's take a look at the results. There is some strong agreement that there are some competing leader pursuits. Oh, boy, as a parent, I feel that one. Oops, let's see, let's stop sharing. And then we have a lot of librarians in the house, so I'm also super curious about this one, access to well-resourced school libraries. Okay, here are results. Super interesting. So I would love to hear, this is the first one where we've had kind of some balance between agreement and disagreement. So please use the chat. I would love to hear from someone who disagreed on why that is. Perhaps it's because you have a district that strongly supports their school library programs. Perhaps you have at your particular school a principal who is consistently funding that school library. So I'd love to hear, and also would love to hear from those who strongly agree with that statement and why that is. So please use the chat. Unfortunately, I'm not able to monitor both at the same time, but I would love for you all to have that conversation. And then one last poll. Out of all of those causes of reading decline, which one do you feel for your school environment or for your district impacts students the most? Okay, let's take a look at our results here. And the winner is competing leisure pursuits. So thinking about that, as you're building your reading culture, how are you going to be able to compete with all of the choices that kids have outside of the instructional day? And that'll be a key piece of your consideration. Okay, thank you all. And definitely keep an eye on the chat because there are some great comments in the chat there. Okay, we just did a dive into reading engagement. Now let's focus on reading culture, or the social influences, environment, and resources that affect reading achievement. As Merga states in the early pages of her book, while there's limited research that has quantified the impact of whole school reading culture on student reading engagement and achievement, there has been considerable research that has found positive effects of individual practices featuring in a whole school reading culture. And that, to get you excited about chapter 2, that's essentially chapter 2. It's all of those individual practices that make up a whole school reading culture. So this graphic illustrates what the end goals are of a whole school reading culture. It can influence students' motivation to read, especially if they have competing leisure pursuits, which apparently they do. It can provide valued opportunities to read, especially if they don't have those opportunities outside of the school day. And it can provide access to reading supportive environments and resources. But what does building a reading culture look like in action? And before we embark on building a reading culture, how do we determine what our starting point is? How do we assess students' current levels of reading engagement? I asked these questions of Julia Torres, a former high school librarian and co-author of Liven Up Your Library, Design Engaging Inclusive Programs for Tweens and Teens. Let's take a listen to her response.
So the way that I assessed reader engagement in the very beginning was to do what we called a reading tastes and habits inventory. And everyone came to the library for the beginning of the year orientation. So they would do a scavenger hunt. They would I would get a feel just kind of holistically for how comfortable they felt in the library. And then before they left for the day or for the class period, I would give them the inventory and they would fill it out. And it had questions like, do you consider yourself to be a reader? And 70% said no, and about 25 to 30%, depending on the year, said yes. And then it would ask them questions like, what type of book do you like best? What genre do you like best? What's your favorite book that you've ever read during your school experience? And what book would you recommend to be added to the curriculum? It would ask those kinds of questions. And when I would get it, I would look it over and of course share with their teachers, but also share with the whole staff. so that we could see what the trends were in our building with different grade populations and also just different cohort groups of students. Like the majority of our Latino identifying males have some of these responses. So it was important to look at trends so that we could know how better to address the needs of our students. And then as we progressed into the year, I would work with teachers to discuss things like a once a month visit and what that would look like. It wasn't just let's bring the kids to the library and they can check out whatever they want, and there isn't going to be very much guidance. They're just gonna, some of them will check books out and some won't, and there won't be any follow-up. Instead, there was really intentional follow-through. So they would discuss what was the objective of going to the library, they being the teachers. Then they would come to the library and we would do some read alouds. I would do a quick book talk from maybe 5 to 10 titles, depending on the class size. And then we would also have young people talk and share about their favorite books. And at that time, we had Destiny Discover. So we would discuss whether anyone had rated a book in Destiny Discover, where they give it stars, and then they would write a quick review. We would discuss, what are your thoughts and feelings about it? And then what does a helpful review look like? When I'm looking for a book, let's say The Poet X, and I want to read reviews from my peers, what is helpful information for me to have? And in that way, readers develop a sense for what to look for in a book that they might want to finish and a book that they might want to recommend to someone else. I'm going to cite one of my colleagues, Troy Hicks now. He has a infographic that is in my book and out there on the web. It was in conjunction with a blog post that he did for the National Council for Teachers of English. And it says that young people, they stumble upon, then they evaluate, and they decide whether to and how to share the reading that they interact with. So sometimes that means that they'll stumble upon a book because it just happens to be left from the former class period that was in the library. Sometimes that means I introduced it to them through a read aloud. And sometimes that means that they're browsing the shelf and something catches their eye. There's so many different ways that they could encounter books that they might like. But then the next key is, how do they engage with it? And we found that a lot of our readers developed the ability to know throughout the year more quickly and more accurately what books they were likely to finish. So some of it was a question of shelving. And I remember discussing with Susie how we were going to put the graphic novels adjacent to some of the books like Dork Diaries and Diary of a Wimpy Kid. We were going to strategically put them on the stacks so that they would grab the attention of somebody who was looking for books that might be the next step in their evolution as a reader. We also put the novels in verse in the same region of the library. So there was some very intentional shelving going on. And then there was also the question of how the teachers were going to incorporate independent reading into their classrooms. We had some that felt really comfortable doing 20 minutes of silent reading at the beginning of class. And we had some that felt more comfortable doing lit circles or book clubs, student-driven book clubs, and then having the library time aligned with what they were already doing in the lit circles and the book clubs. So that was another way that readers developed. What I loved was when they would bring young people to the classroom or to the library to be able to just have their reading time in the library, because they wanted them to get used to the library as a place where we can engage with the act of reading without interruption, and we can support one another developing healthy reading habits. So by the end of each year, when we would do this, it was very typical to see more young people identifying as readers. Also, more young people having a clear idea of what they like to read and what they are most likely to finish. Because it wasn't just about being able to pick something up and check it out. Anybody can do that. But sticking with it and developing that stamina was also something that we would talk with them about. What are your habits and what are the types of things that turn you off about a book? What are the types of things that attract you to a book? Most people can say that if there's a really good series, they'll want the next book in the series. But what happens when it's checked out in the library and you have to get on the holds list or you can't get it right away? Then what do you do? So those were some of the conversations that we had. And then, of course, in Destiny Discover, there's the option to curate lists. So we would have, for example, Mr. Isaac's class top 10 selected titles. And we would make curated lists that were either class specific or by teacher request, or just the ones that I wanted to come up with. So those are some ideas that helped inform our reading culture. And I can't say that everything, all the outcomes that I wanted were achieved the first year, but I can say that over time, they built upon each other. And it was really beautiful to see more and more people buying into the culture of reading as an essential part of a young person's educational experience.
I'd love for you to drop into the chat anything that resonated with you from Julie's interview. So a comment about how supportive the teachers were, shelf placement of books in the library, book talking before kids go to self-select books. She meets teachers where they are, where they're at when working with students. So lots of flexibility to reach students. The intentionality behind working with students and teachers all year long was impressive. Now these are rolling in. Thank you guys. Intentionality, data-driven. Bethany saying she would do a reader interest survey multiple times throughout the year. So not just at the beginning of the year, throughout the year, to ask students what they would like to see integrated into curriculum. Love that. You guys keep going. I'm just gonna go ahead and move us to the next screen. Okay, so now it is time to meet with your campfire crew and share your stories, knowledge, and experiences. We will have 15 minutes for this discussion. And please start off your discussion by introducing yourself, your role, and where you're from. And our campfire discussions, I'm going to drop them into the chat because what I'd like for you to do is just go ahead and copy those yourself. Sometimes when you go into breakout sessions, you lose the main chat. So I want you to be able to copy those now and paste them into your chat, because if you're anything like me, the minute I get into a breakout session, I forget what the questions were. So again, here are those questions. You can copy them there so you have them as a reference. So basically wondering, how would you describe the current reading climate at your school and what contributes to that climate? And then thinking about what Julia offered and in your own practices, your own experiences, how can you learn more about what factors influence students' reading engagement? What motivates them and what are the barriers? I think a lot of us have already, it's very clear that competing leisure pursuits, tech is a huge barrier. But it's super important to learn directly from the students themselves. What do they say are their barriers? And especially when it comes to what motivates them. So we're going to jump into breakout rooms. I will be, and again, just before you get started, like any good book club, your conversation is going to evolve into what's most meaningful for your group. That's absolutely okay. I just wanted to start off with some structured questions to really guide that discussion so you can learn the most from one another about what's happening in your schools and districts. I will send out a quick announcement when we have 1 minute left before we all come back. So hopefully you won't have any Zoom whiplash. All right, so let me go ahead and send this out to our breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a chance to finish some last minute thoughts. As always, I would love to know, I know we're short on time, we just have a few minutes left. I would love if you would drop it in the chat, anything that that your group discussed that you'd love to share with the entire group. And if there's anyone who would like to unmute and share what their group was talking about, that would be great. I think we have time for maybe one group to share. Any brave volunteers?
I got to talk with Lee, who is a librarian, and we just talked a lot about how we're feeling right now the pressure of, if things are going to happen, they have to happen during the school day, by our guidance. We just can't depend as much anymore. For those of us that have been teaching for a while, we can't depend as much anymore on it happening at home as we might have once been able to. So just kind of talking about how that influences the culture and climate with just that feeling of it has to happen during the school day in the school building.
Yeah. And part of what we'll be talking about too is how do we partner with parents? How do we make sure that they are also stakeholders in our work? Thank you, Nicole. Okay, so that wraps up today. Today we focus on the why. Why is building a reading culture important? I hope to see you all back here in 2 weeks on Tuesday. Sorry for the typo before. Tuesday, February 4th, to focus on chapter 2. And that will be focusing on the what, the research-backed practices that promote reading engagement. After each session, I will provide a link to a brief reflection. I promise it's brief. And if you are requesting 5 continuing ed contact hours for participating in the book study, please make sure that you complete the entire form. At the very least, I please just beg of each of you to take a couple of minutes to scan the QR code or use the link directly from the slide deck to complete the program evaluation questions in section 2. That's basically my state library report card, and I'm super grateful for your feedback. And finally, if you would like to see more of reading culture in action, in the slide deck on this last slide, there is linked a video, and it really will get you pumped for chapter 2. So again, thank you all for participating this evening, and I hope to see you in the next live session. Take care, everyone.